Hey there! In this video, I'll be testing out the brand new Sigma Art 17-40mm f1.8 lens for APS-C cameras. And I'll be testing this out with the Canon RF system. So I'm currently filming on the 17-40 with the Canon C70. And the first question is, well, how good is the autofocus? So as you can see here, I am using the face and eye detect on the C70, and I really don't have any complaints about the autofocus. Now, the biggest thing, of course, is the image quality. So take a look at the sequence that I shot with the C70 and the 17-40. So hopefully you enjoyed that sample footage. I shot that all while on a recent trip to Charleston, South Carolina. And before we get into talking about the image quality and everything else with this lens, I do want to disclose that Sigma sent me this lens to test out and review. It is a loaner. I will be sending it back after I review it, and they didn't pay me anything. This video is not sponsored, and they don't even get to see this video before I post it. So the opinion about it is my own, but I just want to be clear that this was a loaner directly from Sigma. All right, let's talk about the image quality. I would say the image is sharp, clean, there's a good amount of contrast, it's a pretty neutral image. In my opinion, it's kind of what you would expect to see out of a modern Sigma art lens. There really weren't any surprises. This was all shot in C-Log 2 on the Canon C70, which doesn't have as sharp of an image as the image in some other cameras that have oversampled 4K modes, but really pleasing image. And in my opinion, when you are shooting on the C70 in particular, it is nice to have a pretty sharp lens to go with the sensor in the C70. Overall, I would say the bokeh looks nice. No real complaints there. In terms of the flaring, the veiling flare is really well controlled. The ghosting flares are fairly controlled, but look really nice in my opinion. In terms of chromatic aberrations, I really didn't see any when I was out shooting. I didn't test for it specifically, but I didn't really see any pop up when I was out just getting sample footage. In terms of focus breathing, it is really well controlled. Here it is testing out the lens at 17 millimeters. And here it is at 40 millimeters. The autofocus speed and sensitivity are all set to default settings on the C70 for these tests. In terms of stabilization, there is no stabilization in the lens. For the sample footage that you saw, I was shooting that handheld and I was using the digital IS in the C70, which, the C70 does not have IBIS either, but digital IS, and then I just added some stabilization in post if you're curious about that, but there is no stabilization in the 17-40. So this lens is designed to work on an APS-C or Super 35 camera. Now I'm currently shooting this on the Canon C70, which is a full frame camera, and the reason why I can do this is because I'm in the Super 35 crop mode. If you put this lens on a full frame Canon mirrorless camera like an R5, an R6, an R1, what'll happen is the camera will automatically put itself in crop mode. It doesn't allow you to shoot this in full frame mode. Now, a lot of people ask me all the time, can you use this lens or the legendary 18-35 on a full frame camera? Well, the thing is, it will automatically make you use crop mode if you're using one of the mirrorless cameras. If you're using one of the cinema cameras like the C80, you can force it into full frame mode, and I don't recommend that, but let me show you. So this is 17 millimeters in full frame mode on the Canon C80. And as you can see here, it is very wide, but you do have very serious vignetting, also known as portholing on the outsides here. And even if you look around the edges here, it does get pretty funky. So again, I recommend shooting this in Super 35 mode. Now, if you zoom in here, so this is at 40 millimeters, you get less vignetting, but again, there is still some, and there is some weirdness around the edges. So like I said, best to shoot this with a Super 35 camera. So this is a very unique lens, being f1.8 and also being a zoom, and it's very versatile for any APS-C or Super 35 camera. Now, if you're shooting on a Canon mirrorless camera like the R7, R10, R50V, those cameras, you're gonna get a 1.6 times crop. So this lens will turn into a 27 to 64 millimeter full frame equivalence. Now on the C70, it's gonna be a little bit wider because I think it has a 1.46 and 1.53 times crop in DCI and UHD, so it will be a little bit wider on the C70. The minimum focus on this lens is 11 inches, which is absolutely fantastic. In terms of the build quality of this lens, it is totally what you'd expect with a Sigma Art lens. It is really well made and really no complaints there. Up front, we have the focus ring, which feels really nice. We also have the zoom ring right here, 17-40. We have an aperture control here, which I don't personally usually use on lenses. We do have a autofocus, manual focus switch, which I actually love to see on lenses. It makes things really simple. Just switch it on and off. We also have 2 programmable buttons here. I was able to get these to work on the Canon mirrorless cameras, but I couldn't get them to work on the Canon Cinema operating system cameras like the C70 and C80. Maybe I just don't know how to do it. Maybe it's not in there, not sure. But those are there. You can program those to different things. On the front here, we have a 67mm filter thread. And on the back, we do have all metal as you'd expect. And we also have a weather sealing gasket. So that is pretty nice. Now this lens is focused by wire. Like most mirrorless lenses out nowadays, it is completely electronic. So if you are shooting manual focus, just keep that in mind. It is completely electronic. But the good thing in the Canon cameras is you do have the ability to set the cameras to linear focus, which makes a huge difference with focus by wire lenses. So if you're using a Canon mirrorless camera, the setting you're gonna look for is the RF lens manual focus focusing ring sensitivity and set that to link to rotation degree. And in the Canon Cinema operating system, the setting you're looking for is the focus ring response and set that to linked to rotation degree. You'll be much happier if you're doing manual focusing with this lens. Now I know a big question, of course, is going to be, how does the 17-40 compare with the 18-35? I think there's a couple of obvious things in terms of the physical parts of this lens. The 17-40 is a little skinnier. It is also significantly lighter. The 18-35 is 1.78 pounds and the 17-40 is 1.18 pounds. So that's a difference of 0.6 pounds. Also, unless you're using this on an EF mount camera, you're gonna be adapting the 18-35. So that's a pro and a con. So the good thing is you can adapt the EF version, which is what I own, onto pretty much every other system. You can put on Sony, Fuji, Nikon, there's adapters for all those things. But if you're shooting on an RF camera, you're gonna be using an RF to EF adapter, again, which is a pro and con. If you put the adapter on it, it will make the lens longer and more front heavier and also just heavier in general. But you also have the ability, if you're using something like a drop-in filter adapter, like this one here, you can actually put variable ND filters in there. So that is really handy if you're shooting video on a camera that does not have built-in ND filters, or you're gonna have to use, a basic RF to EF adapter. If you are curious about the different options for drop-in adapters, I did a whole comparison review and I'll leave that linked down below. In addition to that, the focal lengths are slightly different. We have 17-40, which is both wider and longer than the 18-35. Another big difference between the two lenses is the autofocus noise. Most people who have ever used the 18-35 know that the autofocus is loud. It is a DSLR lens versus a modern mirrorless lens in the 17-40. The autofocus is super silent. Like I said, this is the RF mount version and I only tested it on Canon cameras. I am unsure if this would work on the RF mount RED cameras, as I don't have a RED to test it on. But if you have, please let us know in the comments down below, because I think this would be obviously a fantastic lens for the OG Komodo or the KX, because the 18-35 has been such a great lens on those cameras. This lens is also available in a few other mounts, E, X, and L. Now on to the price. This lens, at the time of recording this, is selling for $919, which may sound a little high for you, but remember, this is an f1.8 zoom and could definitely replace a few of those 1.4 or 1.8 primes. It's also really handy to have a focal range of 17-40 on Super 35. In terms of comparisons, the 18-35, which obviously is the first thing you probably think of, is selling for $800 new, but they've been out for a long time. You can definitely find them used for $500 or less, but keep in mind you'll also need an adapter. The other one to probably consider is the Sigma 18-50, which is a fantastic lens. It is selling for $659, which is cheaper, but it's only f2.8. It's also in the contemporary line, which is not as good as the art line in terms of the optics, but it is way smaller, lighter, and definitely cheaper. So in closing, I think the 17-40 is exactly what I expected. It's clean, modern, predictable, and professional. And I would recommend it for any APS-C or Super 35 shooters out there. Like I said before, it is very unique to have an f1.8 zoom, and it's why the 18-35 is still being used daily by a lot of videographers and filmmakers. So hopefully you found value in this video. If you are looking to pick one up, there will be a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.